inconvenience. I think his network is not working. So I would request Dr. Tanya to kindly give her talk on the very topic. Yes.
Traces can be seen in the Epic of Gilgamesh and in India in Upanishads. So here you can see the quote from Upanishad about the self Atman, which is smaller than small, greater than great, hidden in the heart of each creature. Free from avarice, free from grief, peaceful and content. He sees the supreme glory of Atman. So this idea that human and divine are intrinsically connected, and in fact that human nature is reflection of divine, it appeared kind of independently in different cultures in different times, simultaneously, in fact. So in India, it appeared in the times of Upanishads, if not earlier in Vedas. In ancient Greece, it was Plato who introduced the idea that that human soul is immortal. It's part of the universal or cosmic soul, but it was a winged creature and divine, but then it became imperfect, lost its wings, felt and incarnate on earth as a human being. And then it has to wake up, to regrow its wings and to return back to its state of a part of the cosmic soul. This is a legend of the soul which was told by Plato. In Taoism, like for example, the medieval Taoist treatise, The Secret of the Golden Flower, which was also telling that each human being contains within itself an embryo of immortal and divine perfect human, which we are to become. So it's kind of cultivation of immortal and perfect being within yourself, which was the purpose of a Taoist meditation. In modern times, it appears in Goethe, Faust, tragedy, and in Nietzsche, Zarathustra. And even today, in a very kind of simplified and reduced version, but if you look at transhumanist approach at applying science to extend human capacity beyond its current one, or even Harari, his Homo Deus, a book which can be seen as a superficial, but nevertheless, its topic is the same, about extension of human capacities, even though it's a very, I would say, limited and a very specific view, which doesn't show the full human potential, but still it's the same desire and the same strive. So what is divine human? It were not only ancient Indian yogis and rishis or Friedrich Nietzsche Zarathustra who felt that the transcendence of our limits is our innermost necessity of our nature. Can you please go to next slide? Thank you. So since we are in fact, human appear as an unstable bridge between ape and some new, more advanced creature. I mean, each of us felt that inside we are infinite, we are unlimited. Our mind, as a conscious creatures, our mind has no limits. But as a physical beings, we are fragile, limited. But this potential of infinite life, I think every one of us has felt at some moments, blissful moments. So this is to say that divine human, it can be expressed in different concepts and different names. It's a different words, but the idea itself, the idea that human being has unlimited divine potential and we are some kind of divine in becoming, it is not new, and it has been found in various different cultures independently coming to this conclusion. So one of such thinkers is Vladimir Solovyov. He is by no means the only one. He is not the earliest one because he is a 19th century thinker, but he is one of souls which expressed it also in a very beautiful and bright way. So can you please move to next slide? So here you can see, thank you. So here you can see a picture of Vladimir Solovyov in his 20s, 30s. He was born in 1953 in a quite established, so I want to briefly overview his biography and then look at the idea of divine human, how it unfolded in his philosophy and in Sri Aurobindo. I will go more in details on Solovyov because I assume that you know More about Sri Aurobindo and Solovyov is still yet less known. In fact, Solovyov is less known outside of Russia because of, I think, political and cultural reasons. He wrote in Russian, but there is a full translation of his works in 16 volumes in English. However, so here is a quote about Solovyov of his big friend, life friend Evgeny Trubetskoy. In his person, you find an original combination of a mystic poet, philosopher, a prophet, and a critic of social ills, and a joker. So Solovyov is a very kind of strange and very mysterious personality. If you can please move to next slide. No, next one. Yes. Yeah, so this is, he was also a poet, and not just a poet, but he inspired the whole trend of the symbolist poetry in Russia in the Silver Age. Silver Age is the end of the 19th and the very first few years of the 20th century, before the socialist revolution, which has abruptly ended Silver Age. It was a flourishment of Russian poetry. The symbolists and acmeists, they learned from Solovyov. This is one of his poems. Death and time rule on earth. Do not call them lords. Everything swirling about disappears in the gloom. Only the sun of love remains steady. So this is just to give you an image of his poetry. This is his photo from 1870s in his 20s, in his early 20s. So can you please move to next slide? Yes, thank you. So this is his vision of Sophia. Sophia is an entity which he saw in a mystical visions. Simplifyingly, you can call Sophia world soul. All in azure today was my queen here before me. My heart hammered with sweet delight, and in rising streams my soul was lit with silent light. But in the distance, burning down, the fierce earth fire smoked from the ground. This is one of the poetic expression of his visions. Solovyov was also a visionary and a dreamer, a poet, but also he attempted at social reform, even though he did not done it consistently due to his early death. A few words, thank you. A few words about his family. He was born in a very actually ancient and famous family. His father was one of the, actually the most fundamental Russian historian who wrote the history of Russia from the most ancient times. He was professor at Moscow University, Sergei Solovyov, and until today, he is considered to be he is one of the kind of ground founders. Yes, please, this slide. Thank you. So he was considered a founder of historical science. Sergei Solovyov was a very broad liberal views, very kind of pro-democracy, tolerance and human rights for his time. His grandfather was priest, and Solovyov, after he had a very interesting relations with religion. So at some point he became, as a teenager, he's 15, he became atheist, and then he again turned to mysticism. So after he graduated his school, he was very kind of materialistically, rebelliously, and intentions were. So he entered the natural science department, biology, but after 2 years in School of Biology, he transferred to Historical Philological School, from which he graduated. So as a student, he was also fond of Spiritism, and he also was listening to the lectures in Spiritual Academy, which was another university in Moscow at that time. So at the age of 21 years old, he wrote his master thesis, Crisis of Western Philosophy. And in his view, entire Western philosophy was in crisis because it was a critique of abstract principles, because entire Western philosophy was using reason and rationality as the only instrument of knowledge, which is one-sided. So his idea was that metaphysics or philosophy, which tries to know only through using the rationality, is one-sided. On the other hand, empirical science is also one-sided. So the idea is to also spiritual experience is necessary. So the true integral philosophy, which he suggested, must synthesize rationality, empirical experience, and mystical experience, inner experience and outer experience. So his idea that abstract principles alone cannot give us true knowledge. His idea was like, what kind of philosophy can provide us true knowledge? We need to use all our instruments of cognition, and rationality is just one of the instruments of cognition and not the only one. So his book, his master's dissertation received a very kind of lively reception. He had a very bright critiques, strong critiques, but also strong supporters. So it initiated discussion and debate among his time intellectuals and his contemporary intellectuals. Can you please move a slide before? Before, no, back, yes. So here you can see, yes, no, forward. Yes, 10, slide number 10, thank you. So here you can see his picture as a student, and that's what, moving further, this is, he became, this was his critique. So he started with critique of positivism, critique of materialism, and critique of abstract dogmatic metaphysics. His idea was to arrive at what he called a whole or integral knowledge which would unite empirical science, rational science, and spirituality, true spirituality, bringing them together. Thank you. Can you please next slide? Yes, thanks. Yes. All right. So he suggested, instead of the abstract principles, a different path, which can be, he called it all unity. All unity means like integration of science, spirituality, empirical and rationality, and also integration within science itself. So no difference between, so disciplines should be integrated through studying the subjects. So in every, the idea behind all unity is that every view, rationalism, empiricism, materialism, idealism, it has some element of truth, and only taken together, they can provide complete knowledge. So every abstract theory is isolated. And this was his point, and that was his point of the integral knowledge, which he suggested. So some episode from his life, at the age of 22 years old, he went on an academic research trip to London. He became actually appointed as immediately after defense of his dissertation, he became appointed as a lecturer at Moscow University, and he went on a trip to London for research trip, which he mostly spent in a British Museum library. So you can see here, please next slide, sorry. Yes. So this slide. So here you can see the photo of the library of the British Museum, where he was spending long hours. And there he has the vision of Sophia for the second time. First time he has a vision of Sophia as a 9-year-old, according to his poem, 3 meetings, 3 encounters. The second one he had as a young adult in British Museum. He suddenly saw the spiritual entity, and she told him, be in Egypt. So he changes his course, and he decides decision to go to Egypt, and then he traveled to France and Italy. So when he was in Egypt, in Cairo desert, he goes to desert. He was walking entire day in a desert. He fell asleep. Can you please move to next slide? Thank you. So he spent a whole day walking in Cairo desert. Tired at night, he fell asleep, and it was very cold at night. And when he woke up, he saw again third vision of Sophia. So this is in this vision, he, as a reflection of this vision, he wrote a poem, Three Encounters or Three Visits, which reflected. He saw a boundless cosmic azure with the face of a lady. He called this entity Sophia, but even after, through means of automatic writing and through means of mysticism, he maintained a kind of a romantic relationship with Sophia. So his entire life could be seen as a love affair with Sophia, who is a divine feminine, which another way he called her divine feminine. And it is a sort of entity which is not an angel, not a human, which is a mediator between the source, the absolute, and the real world. So Sophia has various characteristics. One of it is a energy of the world. So here, Sophia, the very concept of Sophia was already known to Gnostics. Gnostics were the ancient Greek and Hellenistic Greeks, philosophers and mystics. So this is a quote from his poetry in which he describes his vision of Sophia. A gown in heavenly purple glow you stood, eyes full of azure fire. Your vision was the first blue world feeling like day. What is, was, what shall forever be, all was out their gaze. The seas and rivers blew beneath me. Distant woods, snow-captured peaks. I saw all, and all was one, a single image of heavenly beauty, pregnant with vastness, before me, in me, only you. And his idea was that it was an image of entity which was all encompassing, which was all including. So if we look, it's difficult to express it in words, but if you look for the words, the concept of the word soul would be probably the best to characterize this entity. So after Egypt, Solovyov went to, after this mystical experience in Egypt, he went to Italy and he settled for a while in the city of Sorrento, in the hotel Cocumella. So there he began to write the book Philosophical Foundations of Integral Knowledge, in which he tries to build a new system in his book that encompasses science, metaphysics, and theology together. So his idea was that only science, only metaphysics, or only spiritual knowledge, theology, cannot provide truth. The truth is the unity of all of them. So everything is intertwined, and as a man himself, in man lives the physical, the bodily, biological, and also the consciousness, and also the deeper layers of life. So this was also Vladimir Solovyov's vision of the need to integrate also within science, but also science, philosophy, and spirituality to achieve complete knowledge. He had also nice adventures on the way in Sorrento. If I may move to other, so this is a modern view of the historical hotel. You can see here Cocumella, where in Sorrento, where he was in the spring of 1978, being 25 years old, and he wrote a fragment of his mystical treatise, Sophia, which has never been published before his death. It was published only after his death, but it went foundation for his future philosophical studies. There he also met Nadezhda Evgenievna Auer, with whom he became close friend. Also Russian lady, Nadezhda Evgenievna, he told that he was very open with her and told about his visions, his mystical visions about which he didn't told anybody else. So it was a beautiful adventure. Then he went to France and eventually returned back to Moscow. So at the beginning of 1877, he moves to, thank you, yes, he moves to St. Petersburg, and he was serving as a member of the accounting committee of the Ministry of Public Education. He was teaching at a higher women's courses. Higher women's courses, it was a university for women. So he also becomes a close friend of Dostoevsky, and the two writers and two intellectuals retain close friendship. In fact, some images of Dostoevsky, like his Alyosha and Ivan Karamazov, were written, some suspicion is that they were written from Vladimir Solovyov. So because Alyosha and Ivan Karamazov are brothers, but they're very different. And in Solovyov, there was this contradiction. He was encompassing like multiple sides and multiple dimensions. So his philosophical work was the philosophical foundations of integral knowledge and readings on divine humanity or lectures on divine humanity, which were published. And then he finally defended his doctoral thesis, Critique of Abstract Beginnings or Critique of Abstract Principles. So Critique of Abstract Principles was this idea that no single abstract principle can acquire the final truth. If we need final truth, we need to integrate all various principles, and this was his idea. He was not looking for kind of academic, abstract, cut out from the life knowledge. He wanted to unveil the living mystery of reality. And his attitude to reality was like, in the face of Solovyov, we see somebody who is a paramount romantic. Romantic in the ancient sense of German romantics like Novalis, like Schelling, Schlegel. So he saw entire life as a wonderful mystery, which we want to aspire to find out and aspire to know. So his first period was how to realize the absolute divine wisdom and how to bring it to the world. So his idea was also how to, he wrote also on political issues like great controversy in Christian politics. He was also famous as an early kind of human rights activist because as soon as in Russia, which was empire at that time, well, not that it changed much till now, but as soon as some minority rights or some rights were disturbed, he would write an angry article in a journal defending like he was in favor of Poland acquiring independence. At that time, Poland was occupied by Russian Empire. He was defending against criticizing anti-Semitism and demanding the same rights for Jewish population in Russia. So against persecution of Jewish population. He actually also knew and learned Hebrew, and he also studied Kabbalah and had a deep interest also in a Jewish spirituality. So his life, if we move further, please miss the slide. Yes, we go for that. No. Yes, thank you. So his work can be seen in 3 periods, roughly divided. First is the theory of knowledge, and second was the philosophical anthropology, readings, lectures on divine humanity. The second was the transformation of humanity, political, social issues, and in the final, from 1980, he was fully occupied with mystical art or theurgy, which was creating a new life in accordance with divine truth. So this is a brief overview of Vladimir Solovyov. Now I would like to look at Sri Aurobindo idea of life divine from his book Life Divine, a series of essays. So here is a quote of Sri Aurobindo: "The earliest formula of wisdom promises to be its last: God, light, freedom, immortality." So the idea of Sri Aurobindo on divine humanity, Sri Aurobindo is an exceptional figure who I would think like it's a contemporary advanced intellectual who also embraced the wisdom of yoga and tried to explain it and bring it to the world in a language which a modern contemporary person can understand and appreciate. So if you can move to next slide. This is a quote from Sri Aurobindo. So this is a quote in which I highlighted with yellow his idea of what is divine life. So his idea of divine life is at the same time is very ancient. It's taken from Vedas and Upanishads, and at the same time is very contemporary. And I think it's completely actual and up to date now as it was in his time. So this is a quote: to know, possess, and be the divine being in an animal and egoistic consciousness, to convert our twilight obscure physical mentality into the plenary supramental illumination, to build peace and a self-existent bliss where there is only a stress of transitory satisfaction besieged by physical pain and emotional suffering. This is how he formulates the idea of the transformation of current human being into superhuman, I would say, divine human. So to establish an infinite freedom in a world which presents itself as a group of mechanical necessities, to discover and realize the immortal life in a body subjected to death and constant mutation. This is offered to us as a manifestation of God in matter and the goal of nature in terrestrial evolution. So in fact, he sees human as a sort of, if I understood him correctly, as a kind of experiment of the incarnation of divine in nature. And our task, human task, is to become divine human by realizing, fulfilling divine being in the animal which we are, bringing together nature and spirit, animal and divine, making it together and fulfilling the infinite freedom and immortality in human body. So if I understand the Sri Aurobindo correctly, then I can see it, the life divine of Sri Aurobindo is to become divine human in this body, become immortal without leaving human body, and transform human body. So realize eternity in here and now. Now, what characterized Sri Aurobindo is also his yoga, which is his method. So I think unlike Vladimir Solovyov, who was a naturally gifted mystic and who had visions, but who had no method. He had no methodology of how to do it, because when I was reading Solovyov works, my biggest question to him was like, how you gonna to fulfill it? It's a beautiful, beautiful ideal, but how you gonna to make it true? No clue. And after Solovyov passed away, he left. There was a whole bunch of people who admired him and followed him, but his visions, his mystical experiences, they were just gone together with him. But Sri Aurobindo, he has method, he has his yoga, and he created method of how to attain it. So this is the biggest difference, I think, between the two, that Sri Aurobindo was not only theoretical, but he was also instrumental. He had also know how to realize it, which is very essential. So I continue. This is also a quote from Sri Aurobindo about the clarification of his idea of life divine. So to the ordinary material intellect, which takes its present organization of consciousness for the limit of possibilities, the direct contradiction of the unrealized ideals with a realized fact is a final argument against their validity. So what he means that for the common sense, the fact that the idea of divine human is not realized would be kind of a death sentence. If it's not realized, if it's not here, then it's not true. But he says that no, common sense is too limited. Common sense is not everything. If you look at deliberate view of the world workings, then there's a position that it's not yet realized. So divine human is not yet something which we have, but it doesn't mean that it should not appear or it will not appear. It actually should appear. So what he says that we should not take a limited common sense empirical approach to it. And another quote from Sri Aurobindo. So the Shastras use the same word for man and the one divine and universal being, Purusha. And this sounds to me very kind of, well, Solovyovian, or maybe Solovyov is very Sri Aurobindian in this quote. So when he says that the same word, the Shastras use the same word for man and one divine and universal being, Purusha, as if to lay stress upon the oneness of humanity with God. Nara and Narayana are the eternal couple who, though they are two, are one, eternally different, eternally the same. Narayana, say the scholars, is he who dwells in the waters, but I rather think it means he who is the essence and sum of all humanity. Wherever there is a man, there is Narayana. So where there is Purusha, divine, there is also human. For the two cannot be separated. I think sometimes that when Christ spoke of himself as the Son of Man, he really meant the Son of Purusha, and almost find himself imagining that anthropos is only the clumsy Greek equivalent, the literal and ignorant translation of some Syrian word, which corresponded to our Purusha. So this passage is, I think, extremely important for understanding what Sri Aurobindo means, that essentially divine is as typical to human as to God, that humans are gods in training, to put it a bit humorously. So if we have this idea in mind, shall we let's now look at how, so this formulation of divine and human, the oneness of humanity with God. Now please go a few slides further. So to the slide 27, can you please look at slide 27? Sorry for being very inconsistent about it. Yes, believe in yourself. Thank you. So this is a quote from Solovyov, from Lectures of Divine Humanity, Lecture 2. Its exact quote: belief in yourself, belief in the human person is at the same time faith in God, because divinity belongs to human as well as to God, with the difference that it belongs to God in eternal reality and to humans only through achievement. In our present condition, divinity is only an opportunity, only an aspiration. So if you compare these two quotes, I think that it characterizes, it's almost like one person could write them. I mean, they could not be the same person because they lived, they were contemporaries. So Solovyov died in 1900 at the age of 47. And Sri Aurobindo was born in 1872. So when Solovyov died, Sri Aurobindo was like about 20 years old. 18, actually 17 years old Sri Aurobindo was when Solovyov untimely died at the age of 47. So they could have met, but they never met, which is, I think, extremely sad fact, because people who are so similar, if they met, they would definitely have a lot to talk about and a lot maybe to accomplish together. But, well, the destiny decided in a different way. So now I want to characterize the idea of divine humanity, which is characteristic of Solovyov. So if you can please go back to slide 24. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, 24. Yeah, so the book, it is his book, Readings, Divine Humanity. So in Russian, it's Boga Человечество, from Bog is God and Человечество is human. So translation, it stresses that it's trans-religious, that it's not just Christian, that it's in various religions present element. And the basic element is that humans possess infinite potential that should be realized by our free efforts and in the course of history. In fact, Solovyov wrote that entire social progress is a realization of divine humanity in here and now, including technological progress, including improvement of the human life conditions, progress of medicine, building of modern state, democracy. That's all kind of building divine humanity stone by stone. So divine humanity is pointing to a project of absolute self-realization. So by absolute self-realization, it's like realizing the infinite potential of being human. So he would see human as a kind of a kind of a doll, which is to become a butterfly. So a kind of something which is not yet appeared. So, and the urge to transcend one's own limits is unique and essential to human being. So humans, to quote also other thinkers like Helmut Plessner, contemporary philosophical anthropology, that human being is the only one which disagrees with itself. Can you please go back to slide 24? Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. So this concept is not, there is of course a Christian theological tradition, but it's not limited to Christian theological tradition. It includes philosophers like Plato, Platonics, who were ancient times, and also philosophers like Schelling, like Friedrich Nietzsche, with his Übermensch or superhuman, Böhme, Eckhart, Goethe, and Plotino. So most different names. And most different traditions, which go throughout European history, throughout Indian history, and throughout also Chinese Taoistic history. So some trends in Taoism, which was more like for the realization of immortality in body, there is a direction in Taoism which also has this element. So this is a trans-religious, it's a common human potential. So if I may, you please move 25 slide. Yes, thank you. Thanks. So human nature is seen as a process of fulfilling our infinite divine potential. And Solovyov relies on various classical 19th century philosophers stating that in fact there is an interplay of conscious and unconscious, which reveals the potential dynamism of human nature. So human nature is not something which already exists. Human nature is like a river. It's a stream. It's in becoming. We are not yet what we are. Human nature is in fact a process. It's not a thing. It's not fixed. It's not given. It's a jump from nature into unknown. It's a kind of experiment to synthesize, like mission impossible. Can you synthesize nature and spirit? Can you synthesize animal and God? How can they be together? Is it possible? So this is what we are. We are impossible, but yet we are real. And it coincides with our experience of, I think many of us have this experience that life is a wonder. It's kind of weird to be human. It's strange, but it's also fascinating. And in fact, each particular mode of existence in only a step towards humanization. So we are not yet a period being. We are being in becoming. It's a kind of interplay of natural self and spirit, of consciousness and unconscious, of nature and divine. So this is Solovyov's view of human beings. So please, slide 26 is just translation of the same quote in Russian. So it's original. So slide 27, we looked at this idea where he formulates that divinity is an integral part of human being. And at slide 28, if you can move please to 28, I want to look at another, thank you. So this is, I want to look at another Renaissance philosopher from the 15th century, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, extremely interesting, beautiful thinker who died only at the age of 33, killed by some unknown reason. A very young genius, who was extremely productive and multi-sided in Italy, Renaissance Italian thinker. And this is his quote, he speaks for God. So this is his famous oration on the dignity of man, which also has the same idea of divine humanity, the same concept. He just didn't name it divine humanity, but the concept, the essence is exactly the same. So we have made thee neither of heaven nor of earth. This speaks God when he created man, human. Neither mortal nor immortal, so that with freedom of choice and with honor, as so the maker and molder of yourself, of thyself, thou must fashion thyself in whatever shape thou shalt prefer. Thou shalt have the power out of thy soul's judgment to be reborn into the higher forms which are divine. So it's almost anecdotal. Pico della Mirandola, he tells us an anecdote, a kind of joke, but in the form of joke, he tells also truth, I believe, that every creature, every animal has a certain defined essence, defined nature, except for human being. Human being has no defined nature and essence. Human being is godlike in a sense that we are also creators. We are artists, and our life is art which we make ourselves. We are free to make out of our life whatever we can. We can become godlike and we can fall lower than animals. It's up to us. And this kind of realization of human as the molder and maker of thyself is something which shared, I believe, both by Solovyov and by Sri Aurobindo, as well as some other today's thinkers. However, so human consciousness and human mind is seen as infinite and able to shape and develop everything. However, this is a very, I would say, very high-minded, very noble view of human being. But to balance it, I will want also to quote Albert Einstein. If you can please move to next slide. Okay, sorry. So to quote it, the two things are infinite, to quote Albert Einstein, the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. So, well, on the one hand, humanity is infinite. On the other hand, well, you can imagine our limitation also seems to be almost infinite. To, as Albert Einstein said, it's kind of another side of the same coin as infinite human potential. So, well, this is and now I want to look at the entity which Solovyov called, if you can please move to next slide, thank you. So I want to look at another entity which Solovyov called Sophia. So this is a Rerich picture, image of Sophia. Rerich is another very interesting artist, painter, who lived in the beginning of the 20th century, born in Russia, but then he moved to India and he adopted India as his spiritual homeland. So in Himachal Pradesh, there is a museum of Rerich. This painting of Sophia was painted by Rerich. I chose it it's not a coincidence because Rerich is also in the same spirit. So Sophia is a mystical, a period in Solovyov personal, mystical, romantic experience. It was a cosmic entity, a deity, a goddess. I would say, in fact, it was a goddess whom he worshipped, but he was also kind of a bhakti, romantic involvement with Sophia. He exchanged letters with Sophia, and it were love letters. So his whole life is a one life love relationship with Sophia, which went through his entire life. So he appears as both as a kind of a soul of the world, as enchanted image of the divine feminine, as a divine substance, and also as an energy, which life energy, which is in entire humanity, in entire world. Sophia is a great royal and feminine being distinct from God. So Sophia is not God, it's a true, pure, and complete humanity. So sometimes he calls humanity as a Sophia. So all humanity together as a kind of galactic superorganism is a developing God, another second absolute. In Solovyov's philosophy, there are two absolutes. One is a realized absolute, which is eternal, perfect, infinite. And another is absolute in becoming, which is humanity. So Sophia is a true, pure, and complete humanity itself, the highest and most comprehensive form and living soul of nature and the universe, eternally united and in temporal process, united with deity and united with him, all that is. So this is Sophia, which he experienced, which he met also in his earthly existence. Just some facts. So apart from Sophia as a cosmic entity, he had some ambivalence in his life and his worldview. So this is a quote from a writer who from Trubetskoy, who again the same Sergei Trubetskoy, who was his close friend. The feeling of love for women was well and intimately familiar to him. It played enormous part in his mood and creativity. He was in love many times, passionately, but even this feeling could not change him, for here too the universal element prevailed over the personal individual. So here you can see a picture of Sofia Hitrova with her children. He was closest to Solovyov's ideals as an earthly incarnation of heavenly Sophia. So it was his romantic partner. So this is his vision, Sophia, but also as embodied and incarnate Sophia. So please, can you go to the next slide? 33. So please, 32, not necessary. No, you can just miss it. Thanks. No, next one. Can you please look at next one? Yes, thank you. So he wrote another short, brilliant essay written in a very easy language. It's also literary masterpiece. His Meaning of Love, which is a series of short articles written in 1884, in which he looks at erotic love as a way for human transformation into divine. So for Christian culture, for Moscow society of the 19th century, late 19th century, this was something unseen. It is not India where we have the tantric tradition, and in which erotic love as a way of divinization, as a way of empowerment and human becoming divine is embedded somehow in tradition. But for Solovyov, it was a completely novelty. So for Russia of the 19th century, it was simply unseen. So Solovyov looks at the phenomenon of erotic romantic love between human beings, and he asks himself, what is the task of love? Why exists love between humans? He rejects reproduction as the purpose of love. He says that in fact humans can be married, reproduce, and so on, successfully bring up children and love them also without being in love. So what is a spiritual purpose of love? This is a transfiguration. If you can move, please, next slide, thanks. Thank you. Yeah. So the true spiritual love is a transfiguration of the mortal into immortal. What Solovyov mean in that when romantic couple met for the first time, they see in each other something divine, something infinite, perfect, uh, infinitely valuable. He says that this is not blindness. The so-called blindness of love, according to him, is a clairvoyance, because the feeling of love has energy, it has potential, true love, to transform us into our divine, to unveil our divine potential and to realize full human potentials through romantic and erotic love. This is a beautiful essay. It's a beautiful hymn to love. It's one of the maybe most beautiful hymns to love which were ever written, very kind of in style of Plato. And one of the implications of this, the requirement of love is immortality. Immortality, not only the immortality of soul, in which Solovyov firmly believed, he never doubted the immortality of soul, but also, well, he did when he was a teenager, but then he come back to mystical experience. But immortality as an embodied being. So he claims that immortality, which is purely spiritual, is not enough. We need to transfigure, to transform our mortal body, because the project of immortality without transformation of personality, without including the infinite content in the human personality, is kind of nonsense. He said that, like today, for example, transhumanist, it also has idea of human immortality, physical immortality, like making our body immortal. Solovyov would say that if we are not transformed psychologically and spiritually, if we just remain what we are and simply get technically immortal or eternally young body, this would not do the job, because we will be bored. Because like infinite existence of normal human personality, we will become bored with ourselves. And this will simply not work. So if in order to live infinitely, we need to transform not only our body, but transform our consciousness and mind to become able to include infinite content of the universe in us. So this is also a plea, and maybe one of the earliest plea for the need to transfigure human body to be able to become immortal and perfect. He said that love is the enemy of mortality. And he said that erotic love, romantic love between humans is the closest to the experience of divine, which we can get here on this earth. Well, also short from mystical experiences. So this was his idea of the meaning of human life. It's salvation of individuality through the sacrifice of egoism. Because in romantic love, egoism is sacrificed, and the partner becomes the purpose. So according to him, the erotic love has a key role in the mystical transfiguration of the world which he aspired. He aspired a kind of a mystical revolution which would change humanity. Which allows one person to find unconditional completion in another, becoming evolutionary strategy for overcoming cosmic disintegration. This is his idea. So can you please, of love, can you please move to slide 36? Yes, thank you. So what was his idea, which also caused a lot of objections and a lot of discussions of his time, is the requirement for embodied immortality. So the possibility to have immortal human body and live infinitely in it. And he argued that physical immortality is possible only if personal transfiguration and enlightenment, self-realization has happened. And this is a task or project of romantic love as integral physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual endeavor. So he said that immortality in a body is a necessity, because love, romantic love, would never be satisfied with soul alone. It would be like an angel with wings, but without body, because erotic love needs whole personality, which means body and spirit, mind and consciousness, everything about, even our and valid for love. So now I want to compare these ideas of Solovyov with ideas of Sri Aurobindo on embodied immortality. And immortality was also an important element, an important topic for integral philosophy of Sri Aurobindo, not only for Solovyov. So for Sri Aurobindo, if you move, yes, thank you. So he distinguishes, in fact, between three types of immortality. So here are two types. One is the immortality of a mere physical body without transformation of consciousness, which is a story of Asvatthama. So Solovyov considered this type of immortality meaningless. Meaningless because it would become internal repetition. If we have a limited memory, a limited consciousness, having unlimited life would become just bored. This is kind of what Yuval Harari, a contemporary thinker, writes in his Homo Deus. That we aspire physical immortality, but physical immortality which does not change anything to our mind. It just leaves our mind the way it is. And my remark indeed, so is here Solovyov and both she or Aurobindo agree that it's meaningless if not accompanied by the consciousness transfiguration. Because we need a constant renewing consciousness and open mind. So second one is the immortality of a subtle body, which is a soul immortality, which some Mahatmas or Lamas may have arrived at this state in which, like not the gross physical body, but the inner being which can exist in a subtle physical envelope. And Sri Aurobindo refers to like Avatara Parasurama, Hanuman, Narad, Sugriva, and others, they exist as a subtle body. So also the Taoist immortals, there are 8 immortals in Taoism. So they exist on a subtle plane near the earth and remain in close contact. This is okay. This may be helpful, but it doesn't change the law of death. This still governs the gross physical body. So what Aurobindo wanted is to change the law of death and transform the gross physical body into more like enlightened body. This is extremely close, and this is extremely similar to what Solovyov wanted as well. So now we come to the third type of immortality on which Aurobindo reflected. Can you please move to slide 38? So it's the third type of immortality, which is changing the very law of death. On the 24th November 26, with the overmind descent, the consciousness of immortality has already, I quote here, has already touched Sri Aurobindo's body. Had he and the mother gone along with this path further, they would have created great miracles with an unparalleled display of power as never before. It would have formed not only the greatest of religions, but commanded the obeisance of the whole of humanity. So this is his idea of changing the law of death, transforming human bodies through the descent of the overmind. And this third type of immortality, which changes the law of death, which removes the necessity to die from humans, is very close and very similar, I think, and actually coincides in essence with what Solovyov demanded. In fact, he demanded immortality for humans in his meaning of love. So these kind of coincidences are indeed a lot. So if you can move please to next slide, thank you. So Aurobindo and a new phase of earthly evolution, the supramental truth consciousness. So what he says, what they wanted instead is a collective transformation that would lead humanity not only out of ignorance, but also the possibility of prolongation of life at will, the possibility of withdrawing from the body of will at will, the possibility of keeping away the forces of disease and decay, and the crowning process, the possibility of physical immortality. This is actually what also was Sri Aurobindo doesn't connect it with erotic love like Solovyov. Solovyov does it. But the essence of the immortality which they aspire, their description of immortality as not only transformation of body, but also transformation of mind, in fact coincides. So this is, I think, also another kind of amazing coincidence. So if you can please move to next slide. Thank you. So what he wrote is, it's not immortality of the body, but the consciousness of immortality in the body that can come with a descent of overmind into matter or even into physical mind. So this is kind of the interplay, the dialogue between the human and the overmind. What Sri Aurobindo calls overmind is very close to what Solovyov calls Sophia, or divine humanity. So this is kind of, Sri Aurobindo characterizes it as a dynamic action of the truth in mind, vital, and body. So truth of the mind, of the vital forces, ethereal body, and gross physical body, aura body. So this is, in fact, I find it astonishing, in fact, how close they are in their theory, in their view of the human evolution, in their view of where they are going. So what is vital is a supramental change of consciousness, the conquest of death. It's exactly Solovyov's expression that we need to conquer death. And the last physical result of it, and also to be added like uh, reverse spiritual values. It means that the seeker was actuated not by any high. So the idea is not just to get immortal body, but to transform the mind. So the supramental change. So the parallels between Solovyov and Sri Aurobindo, can they embrace the vision of Sophia as a world soul and deity, as a female polarity of the divine, has a clear parallels to the Supreme Mother. I don't mean Mira Alfasa, I mean Supreme Mother as a cosmic entity, as a world soul in philosophy of Sri Aurobindo. So divine humanity and overmind, evolution as a descent of overmind into earthly realms is actually very close. View of physical immortality as a kind of a consequence of transfiguration. The idea of conquering the death. Can you please move to next slide? Thank you. So the idea of renouncing death, stopping death from being, no, next slide, please. Yes. So here are the parallels between Solovyov and Sri Aurobindo. The idea of integral knowledge, so the idea that physical immortality is a side effect of spiritual transfiguration and descent of divine into human. The integral knowledge view as a synthesis of rationality, experience, intuition, and creativity. And finally, the view of what is progress as a realization of divine in here and now, as a self-realization of humans, collective self-realization of the human being. This is view of what is genuine, also social progress, historical progress, criteria of progress, which can inform social sciences in a very interesting way. It's much more closer, not judged by GDP and not even by happiness. Happiness is closer. It's definitely closer, but still not even just by satisfaction, but by how much people are able to realize, actualize themselves. So it's not pleasure, it's self-realization, which is criteria of. So these are the parallels between Solovyov and Sri Aurobindo. To conclude, their theoretical view is very close. However, what I found a bit frustrating, yeah, you can just, sorry, no, that's not really necessary, sorry. You can just go back, sorry. Yeah, thanks. So what I found a bit like sad and frustrating when read Solovyov, that he doesn't give any clue as to how to fulfill it. He writes only about what should happen, about the essence, but he does not explain. He has no clue. He probably just didn't have no clue because he didn't live in India and he didn't have yoga, didn't have no knowledge of yoga at all. He heard, of course, of yogis in India, but it was not enough. So the method, the structure, the meditation practice is absent. This is what is a kind of advantage, a big advantage of Sri Aurobindo approach. If you can please move to next slide, thanks. So just some excursus about Solovyov was also active socially. Like whatever happened, something which kind of hurt his consciousness, he would write, and this is what happened, a kind of a turning event in his life, that when Alexander II was assassinated in Russia in 1881, Solovyov made a speech, and public speech, in which he said that Tsar should reject the death penalty for the assassins. those people who moderate Alexander II. And the idea was non-violence. Christianity, but also non-violence, because Solovyov, he was principal proponent of non-violence. So he said that he didn't deny that assassinating, murdering a Tsar was a crime. It was a crime, but he was against death penalty as such. Which was for the Russia of these times was not possible, not tenable, unfortunately. He spoke here in the building of the Polytechnic Museum in the March of 1881. And as a result, he actually was invited to the town governor, demanded explanation. He dropped out of the university and he stopped like he started another period of wandering life in which he didn't have anymore any like fixed occupation. He was writing, he was continuing as a creative writer, mostly living in the estates of Prince Trubetsky, who were his friends, and other like places of his friends, sometimes in villages or in the sometimes abroad, sometimes being with Alexander Afanasiev, who is another famous poet, the estate of Graf Tolstoy, of Count Tolstoy's widow. So then he lived abroad. So the life was very like he was not very practical. He didn't care about comfort. It was very ascetic. He didn't had any material security as this life, and he worked hard. He wrote one of his most wonderful essays during this time, but it was a very kind of self-sacrifice on his side, and he died quite young in the real estate of Prince Trubetsky. So in these times, he wrote his work on ethics, the justification of good, in which he saw something like material ethics. So ethics which relies on also human emotions and feelings. So if you can please move to next slide. Also next one. Thank you. Yeah, so this is he with his friends Trubetsky, Grot, Lopatin, who were also philosophers, historians, writers. So Trubetskoy wrote his biography and wrote about him after his death. Grot and Lopatin were also prominent idealist philosophers of his time. So these were very good friends. So, and on July 31, after he wrote his last work on the end of history, progress and the end of history, he died suddenly in July 31 at the age of 48 only, 47 actually, in the estate of Trubetsky near Moscow. He was buried in the Novodevichy convent in Moscow next to his father. So here you can see his his place where he was buried. But then to go back to his vision of the universal evolution, in fact, the visionary Rudolf Steiner, who claimed to be clairvoyant, he said that the soul of the Solovyov was very large at the moment of his death. So in fact, his vision of the universal evolution, he had two versions of a possible historic evolution. One is the optimistic version, in which humanity gradually incarnates absolute in the world. And this was characteristic of most of his life. So he didn't share the idea of historical necessity. Like, for example, Hegel and other, they have historical determinism, but history inevitably goes to some final goal. According to him, there is no necessity. There is no inevitability. Progress can be reversed. Progress can fail. So the idea realization of absolute in history will not fail only if humans will choose it, if we freely will welcome absolute to be realized in this world. So the positive outcome depends on free human will, on our free will. It's not guaranteed. Apocalyptic outcome, the decay and disintegration, also possible. So his vision of this optimistic rise to divine humanity is not at all an inevitable scenario. It's just the optimal, positive scenario, which we would like to have, but we don't have it. So that's basically the point, and that's the kind of uncertainty. He was integrating freedom into his view of evolution. So in fact, the lectures of divine humanity, he wrote like it's an actual struggle of the cosmic process. Can you please move to next slide? Thank you. Thanks. So the actual struggle of the cosmic process for the spiritualization of matter by means of suggesting a social ideal and engaging in political discussions about it. So he did not had, so he was, in fact, his works like The Great Debate in Christian Politics, Russia and Universal Church, History and the Future of Theocracy. So he was writing also on the social part, historical part, but he was engaged in the, so seeing this cosmic process of the spiritualization of matter or the descent of divine into matter. He saw it as a process with open outcome and not guaranteed at all. So this is briefly as you can see, his view is very close to Sri Aurobindo. At the same time, he didn't have a method, and he didn't found Auroville. He didn't found any kind of community which would try to accomplish this ideal. It was just something which was written in books. Well, he died too early. Perhaps he didn't had a chance to realize it. If he lived later, maybe. I think it's very sad that the two never met each other, that Solovyov and Sri Aurobindo never met. They were close to it, but they lived in a slightly different times. So, but nevertheless, I think that these two approaches, in fact, they have the same goal. They have the same vision, similar worldviews, and they can enrich and help each other to achieve its goal a lot. So just to add, if you move to next slide, that Solovyov and Sri Aurobindo are two great minds, but integral philosophy includes also other philosophies. So integral philosophy includes also other contemporary thinkers of today, like for example Ken Wilber, and integral tradition. So the question is like, what is the relation between integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the integral tradition of thought, especially its newest incarnation in the integral movement, which was philosophy of Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber is a contemporary American thinker who is alive today. He is not in academia, he is alternative, but he wrote very interesting books in which he suggested, basically he follows Sri Aurobindo. Ken Wilber is obviously aware of Aurobindo, and he relies on Aurobindo a lot. So you can call him a follower or a student of Sri Aurobindo to some extent. So the question remains like integral yoga is a tradition which engages in the world, as well as Solovyov. He also tried to engage in the world, but he engaged in the world as a publicist, as a journalist, as a citizen, but not as a founder of a certain group or method or practice like integral yoga. And it's very sad that he did not have integral such thing as an integral yoga. So the question also like, what I would like also to know is what in the spirit of collaboration, the current academic and grassroots initiative within integral philosophy might offer for the integral yoga community. Either possible and meaningful, I believe there is possible a meaningful exchange between all streams who share integral approach, modern and ancient as well. And I wanted also to my book, which is not my dissertation. It was published after my dissertation. It was a search for authentic spirituality in modern Russian philosophy, in which I looked at the other thinkers, followers of Solovyov in the early 20th century, who shared and developed his ideals about absolute self-realization, Russian poetry, and also at contemporary streams from Jung to Ken Wilber to other approaches which actually enable absolute self-realization. So here are, if you move to next slide, please, thank you. So here is from article by M. Alan Kozlev. Here is a whole pleiad, a whole constellation of integral approaches which are present today. So it includes, of course, first of all, integral yoga, community, but also earth ascension, evolutionary panentheism, Michael Murphy, participatory turn integral theory of Ken Wilber, great story, universe story, Thomas Berry, eco-spirituality, new paganism, conscious evolutionaries, light workers, star seeds, new age, earth healing, new biology. So you can see that there are a lot of us, and it would be indeed great if all these streams were, I'm sure they can enrich each other because they share ultimately the same goal of divine human. They approach it probably from slightly different angles, but these different angles, they can enrich each other. So I wanted also to point at the next slide at a few thinkers who are also the same stream. So Rudolf Steiner is familiar to you. It's a early 20th century thinker, first half of the 20th century, German philosopher, creator of anthroposophy, who also admired Sri Aurobindo and Solovyov a lot. So Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and Ken Wilber, contemporary philosopher, American thinker, who also offer it a lot. And I want to complete. Thank you so much for your attention. Can you please move? So the quote from Teilhard de Chardin, which is the same spirit. Someday, after we have mastered the winds, the waves, the tides and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then for the second time in the history of the world, humanity will have discovered fire. So I think that we are now, our historical moment is when we are close to the second discovery of fire. It's very much in spirit of both Sri Aurobindo and Solovyov, so finding the spiritual fire within human being and transforming human nature. Thank you so much for your attention, and you're welcome for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Excellent deliberation and very deep presentation. And you really engaged with both of the thinkers, some of the basic concern of their thought, theory, thinking, philosophy, psychology, and insight. It was really a very enriching presentation. And thank you so much for your excellent.
Thank you so much for
dear and respected friends.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind participation. Now it's time to have some conversation, discussion, and dialogue. So first, I would like to invite Professor Gyan Gului. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, it was, of course, very, very interesting. And well, I was wondering whether it can be said of an influence, of a certain influence, at least, of some points of Plato, and principally, mainly, I am thinking at the Phaedrus, as regards, for instance, the idea of the huge to transcend one's own limits, or also to the point that divine belongs to human only through achievement, because it seems that in the great myth of the Phaedrus, of the winged cars, one of the meanings of the complex myth is that the humans had the possibility to reach at in a certain measure, not completely, because there is a difference between divine and human. This is a point which Plato many times repeats, but at least in the within the earthen dimension, and through the achievement given by spiritual progress given by philosophy, it seems that Plato says that humans can at least mentally return to their primeval condition, which is of followers of a divine. And I think that this myth, this image of the Phaedrus has influenced much the consequent philosophers, in spite of the fact that perhaps now the myth itself does not receive the attention which, at least in my opinion, should receive. But the point is that there it is clearly stated that humans have a relationship with the divine. They can lose this relationship. That is, it is not said that human can only have a progress. They can have two decadence. That is, human have to decide whether they wish to have a decadence or a progress. The responsibility is theirs, and nothing is sure. That is, there is no absolute necessity towards a progress. But I think that the point of the Phaedrus has so the presence of the divine, the possibility that the humans can reach again the divine dimension, is something which is central then to the development of all the ideas which connect divine and human, and which do not see a radical difference between divine and human, in spite of the fact that Plato says also that humans cannot reach, the same contemplation of the Hyperhurian world which the gods can reach. So this is the point which, between many points, of course, here I should speak much, but I limit myself to this point because I think it could be the origin of perhaps a common reflection. Thank you very much. It was really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. And indeed, I mean, if speaking about Solovyov, Solovyov was one of the translator of Plato into Russian, his dialects. He wrote on Plato. He wrote the existential, one of his articles, essays, was existential drama of Plato, where he describes a drama that when Socrates was condemned to death for Plato, the truth died in this world. He became disappointed in the possibility of truth in this world. But Solovyov definitely was aware of the Plato legend of Eros, winged Eros, and the winged soul, which is part of universal soul. And in fact, he follows it. So Solovyov's approach to love as a power which can divinize human, which can accomplish the transformation of human into divine, is definitely Platonic. So both Plato and Plotinus, and you can see Solovyov as Neoplatonic, and it's kind of it's uninterrupted tradition, which some call it eternal Vedanta. Eternal Vedanta, in a sense that also in the European tradition, medieval tradition, like Boehme, like Goethe, like Schelling, you can see the same non-dualistic vision of the divine-human relationship. So Plato is one of this tradition, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other respected participant? Yes, one request, one question is, would you like to respond that question, madam? He's asking justification of good in terms of moral philosophy of the very thinker Solovyov.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question because of
one
audibility?
question is on Facebook. It's about would you please explore the, explain the idea of justification of good.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Justification
Thanks.
of good by Solovyov.
Yeah, thank you. So the justification of good is his ethics, in which he rejects the Kantian approach to ethics. So the Kantian approach to ethics, deontology, which says the categorical imperative that you can rationally, that the ethics is a rational acceptance of the behavior which is possible and consistent for everybody. So categorical imperative, I can do it only if everybody can do it and I agree with it. So he rejects this Kantian approach and he said that ethics is based on feelings, on emotions. So emotion of shame towards what is unworthy, compassion towards equal, empathy towards the equal, and admiring and awe before divine. So he basically said that there are the three basic emotions like awe, empathy, and well, shame. Shame is when we do something which is like unworthy of us, and these three emotions, three basic feelings, they force the ethical behavior. So it's very close to Max Scheler material ethics. So ethics which is based on feelings and emotions, because he was unhappy about the abstract and two kind of rational, rationalistic, narrowly rationalistic 19th century ethical theory of Kant, and also utilitarian ethics, which is also kind of coming out of head, and we saw that ethics should also come from our heart, from our whole being.
Thank you. Any other participants? Yes, because we are also running out of the time. So, Sudha ji, Dr. Sudha ji, Viniti Pradhan ji.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you
Yes.
are audible.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Madam Tania for a very beautiful and insightful presentation. So, pardon me if I am asking a basic question only, pardon my ignorance. So, just about the divine human, you know that every human being has got that unlimited divine potentiality. So, in some human, it gets revealed, and some human, it does not reveal that much. So that my first question is, what are the ways to bring out all this potentiality to its full extent? That is one question. And the second question is about sophiology. Sophiology about that merciful unifying of feminine wisdom of God, whether it was related to the Christian theology. If yes, how? Thank you.
Sorry, can you please repeat second question, just audibility issue? Can you please
No,
repeat?
I was asking whether sophiology was whether it was related to the Christian theology. If yes, how?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, yes, indeed, we are not all at the same level. We humans are not at the same level of personal development. Some are like geniuses, some are, well, there are different types of people, of course, and I agree with you that indeed in some this divine is brighter. The Solovyov did not approach this question as far as I know, so I didn't find any answer to it. What I thought about it is more close to the spiral dynamics, which is a spiral dynamics is a contemporary psychological, also integral approach, which says that the personal growth and development, meaning like cognitive, emotional, artistic, social development. So not only cognitive development, but whole spectrum of personal development is the answer. So every person should have go the way of development as much as it's possible. Of course, it's a personal choice of everybody, but the way to realize for spiral dynamics is the personal growth. And personal growth is not just it's not only like personal growth in a broad sense. like, well, our emotional intelligence, our cognitive intelligence, our artistic skills, our empathy, our moral development, ethical development. So personal development, holistic personal development, to me seems the answer. And that's what we are all doing. We are all students on this path. As for Sophia, yes, indeed, in Christian theology, especially in Orthodox, Russian Orthodox theology, there are even icons of Holy Sophia. But, and also some Christian thinkers like Jakob Böhme, who was a medieval German mystic, was also speaking about Sophia. However, in Orthodox theology, Sophia is a very different. Sophia in Orthodox theology is a kind of a wisdom, divine wisdom. It is an angel. It's clearly defined as angel. But if you look at Solovyov, I seriously doubt, like for example, today's Orthodox Church doesn't like Solovyov at all. And for something, because he was not dogmatic. He was going from the living experience of communication with Sophia, who to him appeared much more, if you look at his poetry, in fact, his poetry is the largest source of knowledge about his Sophia than his prose. What he written as a theoretical writing that doesn't give this account of Sophia. It is more appears as a deity. It more appears as a kind of a motherly goddess than kind of Mother Earth goddess, in fact, in today's, so it's very actually contemporary. I could even throw parallels with Shakti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
again, I would say thank you so much for your excellent deliberation. And on behalf of the Vishwaneedam Center for its inclusivity and Swadhyay Center for learning, it was really a very excellent and deep presentation. And particularly, we are suffering from the problem of faith in today's time. So how we can develop a kind of good and beautiful understanding of spirituality, religiosity. And both of these thinkers are so contemporary, so relevant of today's time. And we are also celebrating 150 year of Aurobindo. So we must, incorporate and engage with his understanding with other social sciences of all over the world. Thank you so much for your kind support and deep presentation.
Thank you.
We are very grateful. Thank you so much. And all the
Thank you
respected
so much for
participants.
this.